Well, hello there, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to my weekly Facebook Live. I'm Ali Manning, Vintage Page Designs, and I am joined by behind the scenes of the amazing Amber Weaver, who's going to be helping me out with comments today. Thanks for being here, Amber. Hi, hi, hi. I can see her, but you can't see her. So today we're going to be talking about something that I think sometimes I take for granted. So we're going to be talking about why we make books, why I specifically make books, why you might want to make books, why our community makes books. And then I'm going to give you a handful of ways that perhaps you could get started if you have never begun making books yet. Hi, Samantha. So, and it was an interesting exercise actually for me to, I literally wrote down like 5 pages worth. I'm not going to read to you 5 pages worth of stuff, but I literally came up with like 5 pages or 4 pages, I think, of why we make books. So it was a great exercise for me to try and put my ideas down on paper. And yeah, I'm very curious as I go through the list. I'm not just going to talk at you. I'm going to flip my camera down in a minute and just checking it's okay. And while I talk, I'll be showing you books because I think that'd be a lot more interesting. But I'm curious to know by the end of it which one you resonated with most, or what are the reasons that you make books. So if you're a Handmade Book Club member and you are watching live or you're watching the replay, say hi in the chat, because I know that you are already making books. And as we're going through this, be thinking about why you like to create handmade books. And if you're brand new here, say hi, let us know that you're new. And if you've already signed up for Bookbinding 101, let us know in the chat too. So let's get the chat nice and busy. And I think I'll switch my camera down in just like a couple minutes. So why do I make books? Why do I personally make handmade books? So for me, books are like containers. They're containers for my personal stories, be that journaling, be that memories. They're places to contain my memories. They're places to capture my creativity. They're places to capture pieces of me. So each book that I create, whether it's filled with something or it's just, a book with plain pages, each book like contains something of me. In each of the folds, in each of the stitches, each swipe of the glue, there's a piece of me inside that book. And I just feel like there's something magical about being able to create containers that we can just fill with our creativity, be that, like I say, just creating it and then filling it with our artwork. And I feel like when I'm turning the pages of a book, it's like a journey. You never know, well, someone else's book, probably if it's my book, I know what's going to be next. But, if you look through someone else's book, it's like a journey with each turning page, like something else is revealed. So I think making books is magic. On a more practical level, less cerebral, I think books are like pottery. They're beautiful, but they're also functional. They're like a quilt. Quilts are amazing and beautiful, and I admire people who make quilts. I've only ever made one in my life. That probably tells you everything. But they're also functional. They keep you warm. So the possibility of creating something beautiful and practical really, really appeals to me as a maker. And I make books for the joy of just making as well. Yes, I love to fill them. Yes, I love them for different purposes. But at the end of the day, I like to make stuff with my hands. And if that can involve stitching, then more the better. But I could do embroidery, for example, or I could knit. Can't knit, but I could knit. But because I've had like a lifelong passion for paper and fabric, I just, I was a stationery, we lived above a stationery store when I was aged like 7 to 11. You can only imagine. I've always loved fabric because my mom was a seamstress. I've been a big reader since, probably age 4 or 5, and I've always loved to write and journal. So, books are pretty central to my life. So when I found bookmaking 20 odd years ago, it just kind of brought together everything. that I loved. And I couldn't believe that I could bring all those things that I love so much together in these books. So that's why I make books. And I'm sure you have lots of other reasons. And I'm going to give you a whole load of reasons why we make books, why you may want to make books. And I hope this kind of gives you sparks, like ideas of new ways to use books, but also gets you thinking about your creative process and why you make them. And the other thing I like about making books is that they have parameters around them a little bit. So say, I got this big canvas. I guess the parameters around a huge canvas would be the size. Whoops, hello, it's knocked over my tripod. But I find with a book, personally, I like to work smaller. I prefer to work small. But generally speaking, a book's got 2 covers. Generally speaking, I mean, obviously there are exceptions. Generally speaking, there are pages which somehow attach to those covers. It could be single pages, could be multiple pages. They could be folded pages. The covers could be hard or soft. But while there are choices, there are also limits. So like I say, it's a container where everything is, there are limits to it. And I don't know about you, but I love me some limits and I love me some parameters. And so just before I go down to the table, just a note is that while books are practical, we use them for painting, we use them for journaling, we use them for sketching. They also don't need to have a purpose. They can just be art pieces in themselves. So often I will just make a book because I think the binding is beautiful, the materials I'm using are beautiful, and it can sit on my shelf and I can look at it and I can feel complete because I have created this beautiful object. So I feel strongly that a book can also be an art piece in itself, with or without content. You can make an artist book, which has content, but you can also make a plain book. And I firmly believe that is also a work of art. Let's go down to the table. Let me find you. There we go. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Linda. Hi, Lindy. Hi, Denise. All right. Just bear with me one moment while I change cameras. Let's see. You should see my desk. Covered. Okay. Do you see? Well, you can't see, but you may get a sense, right, of everything that's here. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples. Let's just push some things out of the way. A couple examples of books that I've made I've got my notes here. I've made just for their own sake, because I want to, because they're pretty. Like this is our Pamphlet Palooza book. And I just love the materials. I love this silk ribbon that holds it together. I love the sanotyped covers. I love the handmade paper inside. And it's plain. And I love the ribbons on the outside, and I just want to touch them. There's a sanotype on the back. I love the buttons. The buttons all have meaning to me. They were given to me by people who were important to me, who were special to me. They were created for me. These buttons, these are just some beads, which I just had lying around, not special. But so this book just sits on my shelf, and I could write in it, I could fill it, but I don't want to. To me, this is complete, just as it is. This is a Pamphlet Palooza book. Another example of a book which honestly is complete to me. I do not remember the binding. It's in the book club archives. I will remember that one day. But this is a piece of white canvas, and it's been gessoed. And these are 2 vintage buttons, which are really meaningful to me. Let me flip it around. I found them at a flea market that I was attending with my daughter. So these buttons have memories for me. I love the white. I love the colors here. It's not blank inside. It's just got some mixture of papers. But I'll never fill it because to me, it just feels complete. So this can just sit on the shelf and be my book. And I'm good. And then the same with this one right here. We have to start piling these books up somewhere, don't we? This one right here, it's like an eco print, one of my very first eco prints, so it's really special to me. It's a simple long stitch with slit cover. This was featured in Cloth Paper Scissors when they were still around, and I did a tutorial on it. So again, it's a meaningful piece of work to me. I love the hand stitching. I tea dyed and rust dyed the pages inside. You can see some rusting, and to me this is complete and it sits on my shelf. So please don't discount. Well, I mean, I love being practical and using my books, and I will absolutely show you how I use my books. Please don't feel like your book can't in itself just be a piece of artwork. And then, as I mentioned, we make books to hold our artwork. Be that writing, be that poetry, be that haiku, or in this case, it's collage and photographs. So this is a rather wobbly book. This is a Sonova tapes binding. It's got a vintage key on the front, and inside, it's, the reason I made this book was because I wanted to include photos from a trip that my daughter and I made to Kew Gardens. So it's got some, pockets and photos and collage. And I think if you keep looking, there'll be pictures of us. There's Kew Gardens, if you know it. Oops, let me hold it up. So the purpose of this book, the reason I made this book was to document a trip, but more importantly, it was just to kind of contain this artwork. So you can flip through it. Well, you can't flip through it, but I can flip through it more another day if you like. It's like you're here in the room with me. Oh, there I am. Gosh, so skinny then. Anyhow, it can contain artwork. Your book, one of the reasons we make books is to contain artwork. Then here's another. I did these jelly prints, and I did them on Bristol paper. Oh, sorry, let me just turn down my light a little bit. It's a little too bright. There we go. Hopefully you can see that a bit better because it's quite green. Oh, there we are. So this is an album binding, and then I just, put my jelly prints in here. Like I said, they're done on Bristol paper, so they're lovely and smooth, and there's no extra bits around the edge. So I really love these prints. It's all of the same leaf. It's not a large book. So this book's purpose, and the reason I made this book, was to contain that set of jelly prints, which I loved and were important to me. Alrighty, let me grab my Coca-Cola. And what I see within our community and the Handmade Book Club in terms of people putting artwork in their books or putting things in their books, we often see folks using them for specific classes like this one. Well, let's just say I started out this one for a specific class that I took. It was with Jacqueline Sullivan, so it was some asemic writing and some, can't remember what we did here. So my book, the reason I made this book was to contain a class, which was for asemic writing. Of course, then I just went rogue and just started filling it with whatever I fancied, like postcards and things. Apparently, postcards were the thing I decided to continue filling it with. Anyhow, but this is a reason to create a book. A reason to create a book is to capture a class you're taking. I see Handmade Book Club members doing that very often, particularly when they're taking a year-long class, like, I forget some of the year-long classes. You know the ones I mean, like Wanderlust. If they're taking a year-long class, they'll often create a handmade journal to contain that kind of thing, not to contain that content. I see many of our Handmade Book Club members, I know you've seen this many times, many of our Handmade Book Club members are Zentangle artists, and so many, including me, use Handmade Journal for Zentangle. You could absolutely purchase one, of course you could, but creating your own to contain your artwork, I feel like is pretty sweet. Another reason people, I'm just looking around my desk, another sort of thing people put inside their, here's one of my very first books. We have a lot of collage artists. So this is filled with collage. It's like a mini accordion book. It's got some quotes. Let me read you this quote. It's by Marianne Williamson. It says, as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. I love that. So we have members who are really into collage, and maybe they put collage inside their books. I love words. So you can see here, I made this very simple little book, and it's filled with quotes. So we make books to contain our own artwork. I also make books to contain daily notes. So I'll take this book right here. Let me make sure. This is from 2017, but each of the different signatures I've used for different daily notes. This is some journaling. This was a class I took. And then this was the year my daughter went to college, or she was applying to schools. So there's a lot of phone numbers for different universities. I can't even read this upside down, but ideas for projects, more things for going to college and things. So another reason we make books is for notes. What does that say? Books to read. So, and do you notice something? Guess what? Very few of them are finished. It's one of the reasons I show you this one, because it's one of the few books I've ever finished. We make books just for daily notes, and I don't think that it's a luxury or whatever you want to call it, to create books just for everyday notes. And then here's another example of where I used a book for a class. So this is a leather binding. It's started out for a specific trip. And then I put photos of that trip in here. You can see the little photos. And then it sort of morphed into making artwork from the class. So again, it started as one thing and ended as another. And then it just continued as a journal. And actually, I think this might be finished. Look at that. Oh, no, see, it's not finished. There's always a few pages left at the end. So this is another reason I make books, another very practical reason why I would make a book. And another reason why we would make books, friends, is to customize them. So we were talking about Zentangle earlier. You can't do Zentangle on super, super thin paper because the pen would bleed through. You can't do watercolor on, again, copier paper because it's going to bleed through. Well, it's not going to bleed through. It's just going to make it wet and wrinkled. So another reason why we make books is so that we can create the right book for the right project, for the right medium, for the right budget, for the right size. So let me show you this book, for example. This is a moleskin, purchased moleskin. And look at it, it's about to collapse. And I love it, and I'm never going to throw it away. But I just decided I'm going to use a moleskin. There's probably a craze of moleskins. But do you see my method of working, as you probably can figure out, is I add a lot of stuff. I add things to my books so they get very bulgy. So, I mean, this is several years worth of just stuff. It's just my stuff. It's my everyday stuff that I find, that I like, that I just, I want to play with. This is just a play journal. But because I add a lot of stuff, this is not the right binding. So what might be the right binding is one that allows for expansion. So like this one right here that I showed you earlier, this one can expand because look, there's gaps between the signatures. So not only is it the right paper, so this is a writing paper, which is perfectly fine for this. Not only is it the right paper, but it's got enough space for what I want, and I've made this the right size. This size fits in my purse. This one right here, I mean, it's fine, it's lovely. I love this book, but it's not, and it's a good size, but it's not the right structure. Here's another example. This is a book that none of you will have seen yet. Actually, I'm about to. It's the February binding. Good size. This book. It's huge. It's 12 inches tall and 9 inches across. So this is a gift for someone. It's got this binding here. I'm not gonna. You have to wait and find out what the binding is. But this is a gift for someone because they work with watercolor. They're watercolor artists. They wanted a leather journal, but they wanted £300 paper. I don't know if you can hear it. It's very, very thick. This is handmade watercolor paper, at least 300. Is it 300 GSM? 300 pounds, I think. Heavy, heavy, heavy is what I'm telling you. So first of all, to buy this, I'm not sure he could buy this book, this artist who wanted it. I'm not sure he could buy one with handmade paper, this many pages, and this size. But if he could, can you imagine what it might cost? I mean, this is a gift for someone. It would cost like hundreds of dollars. So another reason why, making our own with the specific paper and sizes, sometimes it's actually more cost effective. That one might be a little stretch though, because I know how much we love to spend money on art supplies. So there's a good example. And then here's another example of how I would use a book to capture notes. I'm kind of going back a little bit here, but 2018, maybe 19, I can't remember the date, it's upside down. I was doing a lot of eco printing. So I made this book especially for me to do lots of notes in, lots of writing. See, lots of writing, lots of notes, how much mordant I used, how much this, how much that, a lot of text. So I chose a paper that would take the text really well, that there's lots and lots of pages, because it's, I've used up quite a lot of it. It wasn't quite the right structure because I wanted to add some things. I wanted to add samples. So what I did was I just cut out a few pages to make space for my samples. So this is another reason we would make a book or adapt a book that we have, is to, again, for samples for a particular project. And I made this one custom for, like I say, the size I wanted and the project that it was, even though I had to budget a little bit. And talking of gifts, books as gifts are just amazing, quite frankly. I love receiving gifts. I didn't have time, but recently, when members went to Books in the Woods, I received many beautiful handmade cards and books, which I didn't have time to show. Perhaps I'll show those another day. But just receiving a handmade book and having someone write inside it, I mean, come on. It's like there's nothing else like it. Let me just move those across. And what I'll say to you is that, let me find my next books. What I'll say to you is many people are afraid to, some little notes here, that many people are afraid to use books that they're given, but I just really encourage my family and friends who I give a book to, just use it, folks, use it. And it's got to a point now where my family are requesting books. Just yesterday, my brother's like, I need a recipe book, by the way. So, yeah, it's just, they're very meaningful, and I do encourage you to, encourage the recipients to use them up. I feel like there's emotional benefits to making books, but I mean, for all creativity, frankly. As if you're on this live or watching the recording, I would imagine that you would agree with me that getting into the zone with, gluing, folding, stitching, in whatever hobby you choose, it is beneficial. Get into like a flow state, even if it's just for 15 minutes, while you say, glue some papers together. I just don't see how it can be a bad thing in this particularly chaotic world. And another reason I make books, and I suspect many of you do too, I don't know if you can see how tactile this book is. Can you see that? You can see these shiny vintage buttons. You can see like another button with I don't know what kind of fabric that is. Canvas, I don't know. Lovely flower, and there's ribbon, there's seam binding, there's muslin, there's thick ribbon. This is tactile. This feels really good to hold. And in this world where, all we hold is our phones all the time or our tablets, I don't know, holding a physical book, it just feels pretty darn good. That can be a purchase book, of course, but if we've made it with our own hands, there's just something about holding and hugging a book, I think. I think it's like petting a dog or a cat. It's supposed to lower your blood pressure. I think petting your handmade books is also blood pressure reducing. I find also that creating books is a good way to combine different hobbies. So for example, I love poetry. And so here's I'm not gonna be able to undo this now. Here's a book that, it's a Turkish map fold, but I love poetry. So, I combine my hobby / love of poetry into a book. Okay, it's upside down. So this is not my artwork. This is a poem by Walt Whitman. But, combining different hobbies, I think bookmaking lends itself really well to that. And for example, let's say, I love, this is not a finished book, by the way. I found this like the bottom of a drawer. So it's not finished. But, I love embroidery. So apparently when I made this, I was on a French knot kick. Well, I love embroidery and I love hand stitching. So that combined these two hobbies for me. You could enjoy card making, scrapbooking. I mean, honestly, I'm not entirely sure what my plan was for this book. I think I was just having a good time making French knots everywhere. So we'll just go with that, shall we? French knots, French knots, French knots. Let's picture my little girl. But I just love how you can combine different things. Like I mentioned earlier, I combined, my hobby of words and quotes in there. The hobby of collage. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that too quickly. It just allows you to mix your hobbies together, like sashiko, for example. I love sashiko, so then I like putting sashiko on the front of book covers. Collage, as we mentioned before. I love fabric. I love sewing. So these are old, I don't know, these are from Stampington. You remember the papers that you get in Stampington magazines? That's what these all are. They're all just papers from there. I'll just put into this little book. But bringing together two hobbies, be that quilting, be that embroidery, be that, art journaling, I feel like combined with bookmaking, I think it's sweet. And the other benefit too is that, frankly, you've probably already got a lot of the tools and supplies that you need. So for example, if you're a quilter, you've probably got a rotary cutter. If you're a card maker, you've probably got a bone folder. Other crafts, you're going to have a cutting mat, you're going to have a knife. So not only does it combine the skills that you already know, but I feel like bookmaking is great because it combines tools and supplies that you already have. I mean, there's no quilter that doesn't have extra fabric. There's no art journaler who doesn't have tons and tons of scraps and probably quotes all over their desk. And talking of which, bookmaking, frankly, is just like the best way to use up scraps. I mean, look at these scraps. We did this on a video on Instagram. 2 pieces of paper glued together. These are handmade papers, I think, or batik papers, envelopes, tissue paper, paste paper. I mean, literally tiny, tiny scraps of paper, just all stuck into a book. So bookmaking really does lend itself to using up scraps. And you saw this one here. This is just the epitome of scraps, quite frankly. I can't, yeah. And what else was I going to mention? Making books, you might notice, actually, let me just show some others, because another thing that I love about making books, at least one more thing, is often I'll use it to showcase art, like art supplies or fabric or paper that is really meaningful to me, like the buttons you saw earlier, or sort of photograph my daughter. Like these books here, this is a Coptic binding, and I'm using it, but this is a really special piece of like limited edition Liberty fabric that I got from an artist friend when I was in Lowell. So this has meaning to me. This is another piece of Liberty fabric. This is a case binding. And I got this when I was a teenager, when my friend and I used to go up to London and walk around Liberty and think we were very sophisticated. So, showcasing special pieces of fabric or paper. This isn't necessarily special, but this is a accordion book. And I just love this Japanese paper, or Japanese style paper. It's an accordion. Simple Accord, I haven't used it yet, but I just wanted to showcase this paper, so why wouldn't I make a book with it? The other thing I think that is nice about making books is that there are, as I said earlier, I think there are parameters around it. So it's actually really good for people who like a more structured creative practice. So for example, making this book right here, this Coptic binding, I had to make 2 hardcovers. I had to cover them in fabric and then, put an end paper on there. There's a way to do that well, with nice corners and everything. Then I had to make my signatures, and then I had to put them under weights. Then I had to punch holes in my signatures, in my covers. Then I had to do the sewing. Then I did some gluing. So you can see it's like step by step by step. So I feel like for maybe knitters, for example, people who crochet or who follow a pattern, bookmaking is a really natural leap, like the next step, or not the next step, but it's an easy transition, I think, for people who like more to work in a more structured way. Because I think like having a structure, having sort of a list, like a container for it is actually quite liberating. It feels supporting and it doesn't feel limiting, personally. And it's quite nice to have a jumping off point. So for example, let's think, I'm just trying to think of an example. A jumping off point, like we are going to make this binding here, and this is called a ledger binding. So the jumping off point is, let's make a ledger binding together. It's easy, 2 holes, 2 bits of thread. So rather than saying, here's a blank canvas, go make something, like, what? Oh, I'm sorry, what? Here's a blank canvas, here's a blank page, here's a blank art journal. By me saying, okay, we're going to make this structure, I feel like it requires a little less inspiration, because I know that we're going to make it with these 2 holes here. I already kind of know the size we're looking at. So then I can get creative with the materials I choose, but it gives me a jumping off point rather than just a blank page. And also, if you're making it for a specific reason, if you're making it for a particular poem, then I feel like you're relying less on inspiration, and it's just less scary, I think. I could be wrong. And then another major area I would love to touch on. Oh, hold on. Well, let's talk about scraps, shall we? I meant to show this last week in my Facebook Live, but I didn't. Maybe I did. Who knows? I mean, look at these scraps. Who doesn't have scraps like this? This is a scrap of clothing, ribbon, dictionary page, music, lace, linen. That feels like, don't know, silk or something. You can see they're just scraps. And look, I've just sewed them on. I've glued and sewed them on. Like and it's a pamphlet stitch. So 1, 2, 3 holes, simple stitching. If you were someone who, sewed, made clothes or something, this will be a great entry point for you based on the materials and tools you have, and, your stash of fabric. All right, I digress. The main reason that many of you I know make books is memories. And I thought I would share with you a couple of my very first books. And I made mistakes. These literally are some of the very first books I made. I'm going to hold them up for you. And let me show you, I made them wrong. Do I care? No. Because, look, I did it like, here's the cover, but it doesn't open correctly. You might not be able to see it properly, but it opens the wrong way. So there we go. It opens the wrong way. Never mind. Like, it's upside down, actually. That's the front cover. And here it is. But actually, I put the title on the back. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. But one of the main reasons that many of you do this is to create legacy projects. So this right here was for my daughter. And I've told you about this many times, my daughter. And these are pictures of her family. So, yeah, when we flip it over, I think a couple fell off. That's a memory which I just cannot replace. And you may notice underneath, there's just like little writing. I think that's her writing of the people who they were. She did that later. And here's another one. I did it wrong. I did it backwards. See, this was supposed to be the front cover. It's actually the back cover. Oh, well. Or is it? Yeah, it is. It's the back cover. This is one of the very first books I ever made. Ever. It's just scrapbook paper and a 4-page accordion. But let me tell you, this person is no longer with us. Auntie Christine. Bampy Doug is no longer with us. That's my husband's grandfather. That's his grandmother, no longer with us. And my father-in-law, no longer with us. So, you know, half of the people here are no longer with us. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a little childlike. It was meant for my kid, but you know what? That is so special to me. And like you say, it's a legacy piece. And no, it's not an amazing album that could go in the Library of Congress. Hasn't got a special box. It's not made out of, you know, acid-free paper. I think it's a recycled tea, something or other, tea advertisement. None of it's made out of anything fancy. And here's another one. This is one of my very first books. It was made with rings, like these. Remember these big rings you get from the office supply store? This is a book. This is one of the very first books I made. And actually, no, it wasn't. It was a bit later. You can see in here, it's a picture of my daughter. And then all these are envelopes. And they're filled with her artwork. And they're filled with her schoolwork. Because school was pretty important to my daughter. Here's this little picture. Hannah. Oops, let me put it on the screen. And then right here, look, it's like one of those first day of school letters where my eyes are blue, my hair is brown. And she tells us she wants to be a teacher and a vet, and she has 2 cats. So, I mean, come on. And, you know, when I looked at this today, I'm like, oh, I made a mistake there. Look, I punched the holes there. Okay, oh, well, there we are. I covered it over with a piece of ribbon. You wouldn't have known unless I told you. No one would know. So these sort of legacy pieces, like I say, be they really fancy wedding or baby albums, or just simple little things like this. To me, this is why I make books. So that literally 20 years later, this book is 20 years old, I can cry, you know, when I look at that little girl who's now 25. Personal reflections are another one. You know, I've shown you a lot of my journals where there's a lot of, you know, a lot of personal reflections and a lot of quotes, a lot of, you know, things that are important to me that I want to get down that perhaps, you know, are private, but also travel. I also, you know, I think you've seen in here, I capture everyday moments. I mean, look, these are just everyday moments. These are quotes. These are, you know, they're just from a can of soda. I mean, come on, why would you have that? But I like it. You know, tickets. These are just everyday things. An old journal from 2016. Who knows? This was, you know, a YouTube video I watched. Okay, that could go in there. These are just everyday things. Business cards, things from friends. But they don't have to be every day. Obviously, they can be from a trip. So I think many of you have seen this book before. I did a YouTube flip through, but, you know, this is one of my travel journals. A little bulky, but never mind. But again, this was designed specifically for this trip. You know, this is a book about Italy. Is it? Is this the one about Italy? No, this is not. The book isn't about Italy. The pages inside, the end papers are all about Italy. So, you know, I chose this book and I created this book specifically for this trip that I made, knowing that it would expanded a bit further than I thought. But, you know, inside are all the things that I want to remember, all the photos, all the tickets, all the thoughts that I want to keep for this really special trip that my husband and I made for our 25th wedding anniversary. So, you know, there's everything in here. And many of you have seen this before. So containers, they're containers for our words, they're containers for our memories, for photos, for travel documents, they're our grandchildren's artwork, they're our children's artwork. These books capture memories for us. And for me, that is, I would say, one of the main reasons I make books is to capture capture my life. I think I might switch cameras and stand up and answer questions. And I'm going to give you some ways that if you have not made a book yet, sorry, it's in my Coke here. If you've not made a book yet, I'm going to give you some ideas on how perhaps you could get started based on some of the things that I have around here. So bear with me a minute. Gosh, I'm hot bothered. I feel like I've run a marathon showing you all those books. There we go. Okay, how can you get started based on some of the things that I've said? Well, honestly, the first thing I would do is take an inventory of what you've got. Because I promise you, I absolutely promise you, you've got more things in your stash than you realize. You've got a copy of paper, you've got packaging you've kept, you've got gift wrap. I know you have. I know you've kept gift wrap from that people have given you or ones that you've seen in stores. I know you've kept interesting envelopes. I know you have. Start by looking around for sewing needles, for tools. What kind of knife do you have? I bet you have one. You've got a ruler, you've got scissors. So do a little inventory, even dig around in the recycling bin if you want to. But do an inventory of what you already have because you're going to be surprised. So that is one way you can start making books. Start your journey is just by inventorying what you have. And then start with a job. Let's start with a job. Start thinking about making a book with one job in mind. Let me find my samples. So for example, this little book here. Let me just make sure I'm on the screen. This little book here, I haven't started it yet. It has one job. It's just a little pamphlet stitch book, double pamphlet stitch. Just a tiny little book. Simple book. Its job is to capture shopping lists. I'm going to put this in the kitchen, and then when whoever I live with, Andy and Hannah, runs out of ketchup, it's darn well going in this book. So this is a simple book, and it has one purpose. That's it. Start right there. And let your materials lead the way. Like this is a file folder, but this is some of my real favorite washi tape. So for this, the materials led the way in the sense that I loved this washi tape. And so that was my jumping off point. I wanted to use the washi tape. I wanted a little notebook for the shopping list. So just choose, a jelly print that you love. Choose a piece of fabric that you love. Remember those Liberty pieces? Probably not as one of your first books. Perhaps don't use a very special piece, but pick something that you love from your stash. Be that paper, fabric, ribbon, and just kind of start there. Let the materials lead you where they want to. And also begin with a skill that you already know. So you remember earlier I was talking about if you are a dressmaker or you sew. Hang on. This would be a great book to start with. It's a little pamphlet stitch book. It's sort of brown paper on the inside, just sewed strips on. So if you sew or you quilt, this is a great place to start because you already have those skills. You can use a sewing machine. You can cut up scraps. You can do the binding if you watch one of my videos or you join BookBinding 101. Start with skills that you have. If you make cards, for example, start with a little accordion book. Perhaps get it the right way around. That would be good. But you have really good skills for folding and scoring. So start with an accordion book because it uses skills you already have. If you are a quilter, hang on, start with like a fabric book like this. It's got some interfacing inside. And I did a hand blanket stitch, but you could zigzag around the edge. You could use your pinking shears, and this is a simple chain stitch, which we'll also be doing in BookBinding 101. But does that make sense? Like, don't think you have to start out and with something really complicated like a Coptic binding, and you've never done stitching before because you're a card maker. Well, don't start there. Start with something that uses not only materials, not only tools, but also some skills that you already have. And then talking to skills, I would really suggest as a way to start making books is to repeat yourself. So, that's one of my favorite things to do, is repeat myself. Make the same book over and over and over again. Not until you want to throw it across the room. But like, for example, you can see how many of these little washi tape books I've made. Like at least 2 of them are a chain stitch binding, which we'll be doing. In fact, these are the books that we do in Bookbinding 101. These little washi tape books with the chain stitch binding, and this one right here with the pamphlet stitch binding. But make them over and over again so that you get some muscle memory, so that you get some confidence, so that like that one book isn't so precious, because it's like having a production line. You've got multiples of them. So I just feel like it cements those skills in your hands and in your brain, and it builds your confidence if you just make the same thing over and over and over again. It's like, you know, a dish. Like the first time you make spaghetti carbonara, not that I do, you know, it's fine. You followed the recipe. Then the second time it's a bit better. Third time, that's quite good. Fourth time, you're like, heck, that's a really good spaghetti carbonara. So just repeating those skills, I think, is really good when you want to get started with making books. I'm going to draw breath. I'm going to have a drink. I'm going to quickly tell you, if you haven't signed up for Bookbinding 101, this isn't for book club members because you're already pretty, you know all of the things I'll be teaching Bookbinding 101. But if you are curious about learning to make books and really want to start with some absolute basics, like what paper to choose, what type of cover to choose, how to do those books that I just showed you. It does start next Monday, which is February 2nd, and goes through Sunday, February 8th. There's 4 live sessions, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. They're at noon Eastern. They're about 90 minutes each. And I'll be teaching, I'll be demoing, and then there'll be Q&A. And then I'll give you homework to do for the next time. You're going to get a workbook with it, and everything's recorded and available for 30 days. And we also have a hopping Facebook group. So I know Amber's going to drop the link in. But now I would love to know questions, and I'd also love to know why you make books. And I think I'll draw breath. Do you have anything for me, Amber? There we go. Catherine says, I'd love to learn how to make an accordion book with hardcovers. Do you offer that when we join book club? Yes, we have several books like that in the archives. I think it was the very first project I ever taught, but then there's several others as well. So yes, we definitely have accordion with hardcover. What else? I like to use a sewing machine in my bookmaking. Can I use a really long basting stitch? Yeah, what a great idea. Love that, Jane. Yeah, like I wonder how long your basting stitches are. I don't think my sewing machine's that fancy. It's pretty basic. But yeah, absolutely, go for it. And that'd be great. What other questions do we have? Poor Amber. What type of threads for binding? Great question. So ideally, you would have, you can see back here, ideally you would have linen thread. This is linen sewing thread, ideally. Comes in different thicknesses. You can get like a 3 or a 4 ply. That's how they describe it in basket making, and it's got wax on it. This one is a 12 and 3 or an 18 and 3. That's another way that people describe linen thread. You can buy it waxed or unwaxed. But when you're first starting out, I wouldn't buy big spools of this thread. I would use embroidery floss, and I would use pearl cotton, and I would get a piece of beeswax and just wax some cotton. Ultimately, if you're like, I love this hobby, I really want to get into it, then I would suggest you buy linen thread. But for starting out, pearl cotton or 6 strands of embroidery floss, I think are great. Don't use, if you go on, well, first of all, let's try and avoid Amazon, because if you use Amazon, sometimes for bookbinding, they'll send you nylon thread. Do not use nylon thread. That's used for like leather, like for leather wallets and things. It's not the right thing to use. So do not use nylon thread. It'll cut the paper. What else? Other questions? It's a great question, Deb. How about single page books? Yes, lots of single page books. So a single page book could be like a Japanese stab binding where, you know, you have, I've got lots of things here. Don't think, oh, actually, hold on. We find one on the desk. Let's find one on the desk. Can I find it, folks? Can I find it? Honestly, there's just too many. There's too much. There's too much going on here. Oh, here, this one right here. This is referred to as a stab binding. It's single pieces of paper, and you've got holes here, and it's like it's stabbed, like you're stabbing the needle through. But you also see like 4 holes, and then the thread wraps around the spine. You can get this is a single sheet. This would be considered a single sheet binding with the ring. You can get single sheet Coptic bindings. You can get oh, my brain's gone blank. My brain's gone. The one with the macrame knot. Someone will know in the chat. The one that uses the macrame knot. That's a really good one. But yeah, there are lots of different single sheet bindings that you can use. Someone will tell me now, I'm sure. But yes, and we have plenty in the book club for sure. We won't be doing them in bookbinding 101. They're a little bit more advanced, of course, unless you're going to do something like this. But yeah, they can range from really easy to really difficult, depending on the binding. But I make several old books with great covers. I have several old books. Absolutely. So there's 2 things you can do. You can either keep the book intact, so keep the spine, and then this right here is a traveler's journal. Hang on. But you can also sew on here too. Can you see I've got like that cross stitch? This has 4 signatures in it, so 4 signatures. Can you see those? Or what you can do is, and what you would do is you'd reinforce the spine. Do you see here? I've got fabric on there because this is old, so you reinforce it with fabric. I did the same with the Italian journal. I think, yeah, you can see there's fabric right there to protect it. Or what you can do is you can discard this spine, take a really sharp knife and cut off the covers and then use them independently. So for example, like this book right here, can you see how it's got 2 independent covers and then the stitching in between? You could use old book covers for that, replace in a binding like this with an exposed spine. Lots of options, my dear. What else? Where is the archive you mentioned? Oh, the archive is in the Handmade Book Club. If you're a Handmade Book Club member, there's archive of like 75 plus projects, which as a member, members, it's like $30 a month. You get access to nearly 7 years worth of archives. So like every binder you could possibly think of. And if you go to our blog or our YouTube channel, there's also lots of free classes too. They're just not all organized in a nice archive. But. Okay, another question. Vilma says, for collage and for acrylic painting, do you make the book, then do the artwork, or is it better to do the art on the papers, then bind? It doesn't matter. Either way, depends how you like to work. I mean, for collage, it is quite nice to be able to have the pages open, or for painting to allow them to dry and then, put them in the order that you want. But it doesn't matter either way. It's preference. So I would try both ways and then see which you prefer. Like some people like working sequentially in a book with their collage or acrylic painting, but sometimes people prefer to then assemble afterwards in the order that makes sense to them. Just if you're putting in collage, you need to bear that in mind when you're thinking about the width. Remember that moleskin book of mine, which was bulgy? If you know you're putting a lot of collage, you would just choose a binding that could expand a little bit with it. And that's most of the bindings we make can expand quite a bit to accommodate collage, probably because I like to add stuff too. So no right or wrong with that. It's just sort of personal preference and thinking through and probably trying it both ways and see what you like. Other questions? That's a great question, Vilma. What's a jelly print? What a great question. I could go get a jelly plate. Hang on. Hang on. It's just on the other side of the room. Here we go. So a jelly plate is short for a gelatin plate. You can make your own gelatin plates, or you can buy them. Most people buy them. They come in different sizes. This is an 8.5 by 11. This is a 3 by 5. Let me show you that because it's easier on the screen. It's that thick, about 1/2 inch thick. And you put paint on there or other things like gouache or even alcohol inks, watercolors, but mostly you brayer on acrylic paint. And then you might put a stencil on there, then put a piece of paper on there and pull it up. For the ones I showed you, I put a leaf on there and then paper on, and then, took several prints to get the leaf that I wanted. It was quite a process actually, but honestly, invest in a jelly plate and a brayer and some acrylic paints and your life will never be the same again. Trust me. You follow someone like Carolyn Dubie, or who's the Dutch? Drop in the chat, folks, who jelly print. Who's the amazing lady who does, I think she's from the Netherlands, who does all the amazing jelly prints. Check them out on Instagram. What else? What else? I don't sew. Great, says Mandy. What could I use to put thread through? What kind of needle do I need? That's a great question. So starting out, I wouldn't buy, you can, to be honest, you could buy some bookbinding needles from a bookbinding supply place like Tallis, Colophon in the US, and Hollanders, and they're pennies. They're like, hold on, let me show you. Like, I have lots of needles. You can buy like a little pack of needles like this, bookbinding needles. They're $2.50 for 5. Not very easy to see. But if you don't want to make an order online, you can use embroidery needles. Embroidery needles will be fine. You might need to rub the tip on some sandpaper just to make them a little less sharp. What you're looking for in a bookbinding needle is for the eye not to be too big. Those tapestry needles where the shaft of the needle goes straight up and then the eye kind of bulges out. I'm exaggerating. That's what you don't want, because then the hole will get bigger when you pull through that needle. So you're just looking for like an embroidery needle or a crewel needle that just kind of it's straight up and down. It doesn't have a huge eye. So whatever you plan to sew with, say is embroidery floss or something, as long as the thread fits through the eye, something like an embroidery needle is fine to start with. Ultimately, once we've got you hooked, then you're going to want to go order proper bookbinding needles. But a crewel needle, and what other needles do I have? I have lots of different ones. Sometimes people use milliner's needles like this, size 1 milliner's needle. Some people use, but if you're going to a big box store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, grab yourself some embroidery. Great questions, people. How much is it's free? I didn't mention that, Samantha. Completely free. My gift to you, because I love making books. Oh, the curved needle. Sorry, I just saw that curved needle. If you like curved needles, go for it. I don't like curved needles. They're a scourge. But yes, you can buy curved needles from, I was going to say Joann's. Sonia says, the opportunities are endless to hold all our desires and talents. I just love making books. You and me both. Oh, it's so much fun. Any other questions? Any other? Oh, yes, thanks. On Amazon. It's hard. It's really hard. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm trying not to use Amazon for books this year, so I'm using bookshop.org. And here's the thing, you know, it only takes a week, but my brain is already trained to think that book should be here tomorrow, and it's not, and it's taken a week. I mean, it just goes to show you how our brains have been rewired. I digress. Any other questions? No, we're good. Excellent. Well, thank you. Can you reuse the jelly plate or jelly print? Yes, absolutely. Use it over and over and over again. They're expensive, so you definitely want to use them over and over again. I've had mine for years and years. All right, friends, thank you so much for being here today. I know I've talked a lot because I have a lot to say when it comes to why we should be making books or why we do make books. Thank you for sharing your ideas. Thank you for all your great questions. If you haven't signed up for Bookbinding 101, we would love to have you. Yes, it is free. It's our gift to you. It's our gift to you to get you hooked on making books. You know, we do have an ulterior motive because making books is awfully fun and we'd love you to join us. So, thrift books, thank you. What kind of papers should we have for these journals? Copier paper, my friends, copier paper. And don't worry, you get a supply list as well. But yeah, just plain old copier paper is fine. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Amber, for being on the comments today. And I will catch you all very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.